Hello folks, the Galaxy S23 Ultra. Many people consider this phone to be boring, just like the S22 Ultra and basically pointless. But let me tell you why it's not so. I've been using the S23 Ultra for about a month and there is going to be a very detailed review. Samsung finally nailed the competition, so I recommend stocking up on food and drinks, and I also recommend sharing the video with your friends. Let's go! Here's the thing, before we start, I suggest you don't think of S23 Ultra as being the same phone as its predecessor, as you'll miss things that are not on the surface. But I understand where this is coming from. The Galaxy S23 Ultra looks very similar to the S22 Ultra, but as they say, don't judge a book by its cover. Even here, there are some subtle design changes affecting the overall user experience. Let's start with this. I came to the Galaxy S23 Ultra from the S21 Ultra and spent the first few days adapting to the difference between the two. Although I used the S22 Ultra for a while last year and the Note 20 Ultra before that, my S21 Ultra was my primary smartphone for a whole 2 years. And it's a massive boy by any standard, but the S23 Ultra, which has the same size screen, feels even bigger in the hand. You will get used to the S23 Ultra size and weight, but if you've got small hands, the width and thickness makes single-handed use very difficult. If this is going to be your first massive smartphone, before you buy it, go and hold one to make sure it will work for you. Samsung hasn't really changed the design of the Galaxy S23 Ultra over the S22 Ultra. It's still that familiar all-business look with curved sides to the chassis and the screen and tiny bezels, albeit the bottom one is still noticeably thicker than the rest. There are 5 circular camera modules on the back and they got bigger, but I can't help but feel that it would be prettier if they were even bigger. Let's leave this groundwork for the future, as well as reducing the bottom bezel. The curved screen is a tiny bit flatter now. It's still rounded off on the left and right sides, but the bend isn't as aggressive as before. Additionally, the sides are a bit flatter. It's kind of hybrid of flat and curved sides, which gives a really new feel to the hand. So it's not especially eye-catching, but this will be part of its appeal. There's a maturity to the simple stylishness of the S23 Ultra, and the device itself is instantly recognizable too. As you may have noticed, my S23 Ultra is in cream color. After 3 years with black smartphones, I decided to treat myself to something colorful. Like the other shades in the range, this is a calm matte color, love it. All S Pens are black, with only the clicky cap being recolored to match the frame. This, by the way, was another point in favor of beige color. I think the S Pen stands out more when contrasted with this color than any of the other in the line. The build quality is superb, it's incredibly substantial, and it should be very durable too. The S23 Ultra has an IP68 water resistance rating, Gorilla Glass Victus 2 and Samsung's latest Armor aluminum chassis material. I hate to beat a dead horse, but the S23 Ultra doesn't support storage expansion via microSD card slot. You should remember this when choosing a memory configuration. You won't find much in Samsung's boxes these days aside from the phone itself, a USB-C cable, a SIM tool and a quick start guide. There is 6.8 inches super dynamic AMOLED beauty, peak brightness is 1750 nits, and I've had no problem seeing the screen under any conditions. The screen's vibrant colors and deep blacks are immediately obvious, and the sheer size of the screen makes it more immersive than you'd expect for a mobile device. I love the wide viewing angle too, so even when the phone is flat on a desk, video still looks excellent and just like you're watching it straight on. According to the specs and promised numbers, the Galaxy S23 Ultra has the same display as last year's model. 6.8-inch QHD Plus panel with a 19.3:9 aspect ratio and a 120Hz adaptive refresh rate and its HDR10+ certification. Samsung promises 1200 nits of maximum brightness in high brightness mode and 1750 nits of peak brightness. Those are the same figures we saw on last year's S22 S22 Ultra. Samsung didn't increase the screen's brightness, although it probably could have done it, following the example of Apple, whose iPhone 14 Pro can reach a record 2000 nits. My guess is that Samsung didn't chase the numbers on purpose to achieve victory in battery life, which we'll get to in a bit. However, and here's the spoiler, it paid off tremendously, and kudos for making such a rational decision. Guys, this is what I call a significant upgrade that is not on the surface. I challenge you to find someone for whom 1750 nits are not bright enough. Speaking of color, it's the same two-mode implementation we're used to seeing from Samsung's. The default Vivid mode supports a white color gamut and delivers a lively output. The temperature slider with its 5 settings is located here as well. You can also play around with RGB sliders if you want to adjust colors in this mode. The natural mode, on the other hand, is spot on for sRGB content, and there are no additional customization options. The S23 Ultra display's color accuracy is of interest to some, but I can't really point you in the right direction. It's not easy to capture the display's true colors on video, plus you need an accurate IPS monitor to see these colors. Personally, I prefer a slightly warmer color temperature than the default. The motion smoothness menu on the S23 Ultra gives you two options: adaptive and standard. The names don't mean much because there will be adaptive behavior in both modes, and standard won't be 60 Hz all the time. Effectively, you can treat the modes as different ceilings, up to 120 Hz and up to 60 Hz. If you are touching the phone, you get the ceiling; if not, you get 24 Hz, unless there's moving content on the screen, in which case the phone will maintain whatever refresh rate is most appropriate, up to 60 Hz for browsers or to match a video's frame rate in video playback. It's also worth noting that the S23 Ultra would go to 24 Hz even with minimum brightness set on the slider. Now, I didn't observe values below 24 Hz. The thing is, Samsung proudly advertises that the screen can go as low as 1 Hz, but it appears to be used only in specific, unusual cases. It's possible to go down to 10 Hz, but not natively. Judging by the videos on the internet, for this you need to use the Galaxy Max House application, but I prefer not to do such experiments with my phone. Somewhat of a blemish on the S23 Ultra's otherwise stellar display spec sheet is that the panel is in a 8-bit one, meaning just 16 million colors. That just might sound like a joke, but a 10-bit panel with its 1 billion color gradations will be better at displaying smooth color gradients without introducing banding. How many people will notice it and how many will care are questions I can't answer though. I'm just here to point out this shortcoming, as there are phones out there with 1 billion color displays. The speaker system on the Galaxy S23 Ultra is your conventional hybrid arrangement where the earpiece joins the main bottom speaker to make up a stereo pair. Each only plays its respective channel, and in fact the earpiece doesn't sound underpowered in comparison to the bottom unit. The channels are switched on the fly to correspond to the phone's orientation in space, while the earpiece gets the left channel in vertical orientation. When playing games though, your palm does tend to cover the lower speaker unless you hold the phone upside down, when the buttons get in the way and are less natural to press. I found the sound to be more balanced than before, definitely richer and wider, with a deeper bass, crisper highs and a wider stereo field. After that, it feels like the S21 Ultra is now producing mono sound. Huge difference, so if you're looking for sound enhancements, they're here. Now, cameras. For me, this is the most exciting part. The headline feature is Samsung's own ISOCELL HP2 200MP camera. It's joined by a far more conventional 12MP wide-angle camera with a 120-degree field of view, plus a pair of 10MP telephoto cameras for a 3x and 10x optical zoom. And its incredible zoom capabilities make the camera so much more versatile than what's on any other phone available today. These telephoto cameras take photos that are impossible to replicate on any other smartphone, at least with the same quality. The camera is also equipped with optical image stabilization and laser autofocus, but I will not load you further with characteristics. Let's move on to examples. In broad daylight, the main camera takes great looking pictures. Shots have a vibrant, exciting tone with strong colors and masses of detail. I like the overall atmosphere the camera creates, which straddles the line between realism and hyperrealism very effectively. Most of the time the colors are amped up by just the right amount, but it still can slip into oversaturation in some situations. And there is nothing wrong actually, that's how the auto mode is supposed to work. Plus you get the sorts of pro and expert RAW modes to play around with and get photos better tailored to your liking. We'll talk more about this a little later. There's plenty of objective improvement in the Galaxy S23 Ultra's photos to be seen when you look from up close. Images are now notably sharper all the way to the corners of the frame. The old one wasn't perfect in this respect. The ultra-wide sensor was upgraded from an IMX563 to an IMX564, but other than the model number, its performance seems identical. Probably noise performance got better, things are just cleaner now. Colors are accurate, dynamic range is plenty wide, detail is very good. It's also worth noting that you can shoot close-up subjects with the ultra-wide thanks to its autofocus, something you can't do with the cheaper S23s. The primary camera supports 50 megapixel and full 200 megapixel resolution, though in most cases it's better to use the default 12 megapixel photo mode, as it handles exposure much better. Check out these 212 megapixel photos to see what I mean. Both the sky and sea are much whiter in the second photo than in the first. This trend continues in other scenes as well, but of course 200 megapixel does have some advantages, including better detail, although not much to be honest. So if you're not gonna crop a photo, then it is better to stick with the regular 12 megapixel mode. Zoom. This is without a doubt one of the best features of the phone. We get two telephoto lenses, one of which can zoom from 3 to 10 times and the second from 10 to 100. Now, instead of 1000 words, here is an example of a 3x zoom with the S21 Ultra and the S23 Ultra. And now 10x zoom. I think the difference is obvious. Even though smartphones use the same sensors with the same specs, there is a noticeable jump in clarity and resolution. But keep in mind that these cameras need light. Given that a 10x camera is even slower than a 3x one, the phone will often use the 3x camera for low-light 10x shots, and only switch to the 10x lens once you go past 15x magnification. Similarly, sometimes the main camera might be used for 3x zoom. Therefore, for example, Vivo X90 Pro Plus with a 3.5x optical zoom can take clearer photos at 10x magnification than Samsung. But with normal lighting, everything falls into place. Here you can see examples of Vivo's and Samsung's 10x zoom during the day on the street, where the zoom is supposed to be used and not in a room where it's easier to get closer to the object. As before, portrait mode on the Ultra works at both the 1x and 3x zoom levels, each sourced from the respective camera. There are no main camera digital zoom shenanigans. Samsung made a point in the S23 series presentation about improved depth mapping, with a particular mention of glasses. Of course, we have tested this, and as it turned out, the claims hold water. The S23 Ultra picked out the frame of the glasses with excellent precision. In general, portrait shots from Samsung are very good, and the new flagship maintains this high level. As for the selfies, this year's models are getting a new 12 megapixel instead of 40 megapixel. To be honest, I really like the 40 megapixel selfie camera on the previous flagships, so I just was hoping it wouldn't get worse. And it didn't get any worse, so you can breathe out. But I didn't see any progress either. In other words, I didn't understand why the selfie camera was changed. You'd be getting more or less the same selfies. That's not to say the S23 Ultra selfies are bad. On the contrary, the dynamic range is excellent, colors and skin tones are accurate. Now, for a low-light photo, the S23 Ultra does an impressive job, but there are some quirks. There are no questions in the evening. In these lighting conditions, the auto is typically good enough to get you balanced exposures with well-preserved highlights and good development in the shadows. Just look how beautifully the sun highlights the stones by the water. It's great that the camera can capture such fine details. In fact, the auto mode in much darker conditions is also very good. Most often, I get better shots with night mode disabled. Basically, you are shooting in normal photo mode and then you will see a yellow crescent pop up. This will mean that the auto night mode is activated. Using it, you can capture such stunning nighttime scenes. Now, why don't I like the separate night mode? Here's an example to show what I mean. This photo is in auto mode and this is in night mode. Of course, with night mode everything becomes brighter. But what happens to the sky? Is it the northern lights from Minecraft or what? Guys, I'm not nitpicking. This is how the night mode usually works. Here are some more examples. I'm really hoping, almost certain, that future updates will address this issue, because in its current form, the night mode on the S23 Ultra with a long exposure is completely inedible. At the same time, in auto mode, some details are lost in the dark, yes, but the photos look much more atmospheric and closer to what I want to see from the night mode. I don't want a phone trying to make a low-light environment look like it wasn't one. which most cameras wrongfully do nowadays. This long exposure night mode is probably useful when it's too dark and when nothing moves, then you can get the most out of dark areas. In any case, try different modes and settings. This is what I like about the S23 Ultra camera, it's so flexible. That being said, if you are not ham-handed, then you can take very nice night shots. I like that the lights aren't overexposed, which I will credit to the 200 megapixel image sensor that's able to process more details. Colors are well preserved and the auto-white balance didn't show issues with warm and mixed lighting. Again, keep in mind that a camera is just a tool in your hands, not a magic wand, especially at night. The ultra-wide camera's low-light performance isn't anything special, but it's okay. Examples on your screens. Nighttime zoom photography requires a bright subject. For example, here is 1x and 3x. If I just zoom in on the first photo, it will still be inferior to the one with 3x. This one was taken at 10x zoom, now 30x and 100x. As for the nighttime portrait, just like during the day, we get great pictures. Of course, sometimes the skin tones are off because a lot depends on how warm the street light is, but in general, it seems to me we get very pleasant and atmospheric pictures. I really find that these photos are quite lovely and pleasant. And before we get to the video section, I'd like to talk about the new old Expert remote. Old because the Expert Raw app has been around for like a couple of years now, and a new one because it's sort of built into the main camera app as a mode instead of being a separate app. You get granular exposure controls, shutter speed, temperature and so on. But most importantly, it can output both JPEG and DNG files. DNG is a type of raw file format that has not been processed by the phone. It literally means digital negative. Those DNG files can be edited in Lightroom Mobile. It gives you the ability to play with color and dynamic range to a much greater extent than with the default JPEG files. Here are some samples of the photos I took while using this mode and edited entirely on my phone. And finally, what about video capabilities? Well, in proper lighting, the footage looks excellent, crisp and clear. Maybe a little too bright, it's very sunny outside, so I can see some overexposure here, but it looks very nice anyway. I also want to highlight how smooth and accurate the focus is. There is a feeling that I can rely on it and not worry that it will ruin a beautiful shot. I couldn't find any differences between Full HD and 4K, except the resolution of course. The same applies to the frame rate. 30 FPS and 60 FPS clips have essentially the same quality, which is always nice to see. As the sun lowered on the horizon, the exposure began to work out more accurately, and now it's almost nothing to complain about. Stabilization works well, even with Super Steady mode disabled. I didn't feel like I needed it. Even if we see some kind of jitter in the footage, it doesn't look aggressive, it's quite natural and looks good. However, Super Steady mode adds more smoothness. For example, here I am walking along a stone beach with Steady mode disabled, now enabled. 8K footage is a meaningful improvement over the previous model. Here is 8K with the S21 Ultra and now with the S23 Ultra. And it's not just the extra 6 frames per second. For one, it now uses the full width of the sensor. It's also sharper and better detailed than what the old model could master. 8K videos take up a lot of storage space, although when compared with the 4K 60fps mode, it's not much more, about 50% more. By the way, let's look at 4K at 60fps here. Just like with photos, 8K mode shoots whiter. You can see it in the sky. So if there is no specific need for 8K, then you can stick to 4K. To sum up, I think 8K is the way to go, and Samsung is on the right track by investing in its development. Zoom videos in daylight shows a good result. This is an example of 3x zoom and this is a 10x zoom. And finally, selfie videos are very high quality and capture excellent detail and generally accurate colors. Unless the sun's blazing in directly into the camera, autofocus does a great job, which for a selfie camera can be considered a big plus. I was most impressed with the low-light videos. Compared to last year's flagships, the difference is massive. There is nothing the camera interface needs you to enable. In the settings, the auto FPS option should be enabled by default. As a result, we get a wide dynamic range, lots of saturation, the shadows developed quite respectably without turning them into a noise fest. Colors are also don't appear to suffer from any degradation at night. The noise control is excellent overall, but there is a catch. Okay, I like how the camera provides light sources and low glare. It creates a very pleasant mood. But here is the catch. I want you guys to understand that there are no perfect cameras, so you need to know the strengths and weaknesses of your camera. The Galaxy S23 Ultra's camera provides really great low-light performance, lowering the frame rate, so when you move the camera around or make quick panning movements, there is an annoying strobe effect. Most importantly, there is noise right away, and and as soon as the camera stops, the noise disappears. Software magic in action. The same thing if you are shooting low light on the go. The video may lag and give a not very pleasant result. Perhaps the chip still doesn't have enough time to process it. During the day there is no such problem. You can run and shoot and everything will be smooth. There are no questions about stabilization. All the footage that you see was shot entirely handheld. This is a common issue for smartphones. Here is an example video compared to the Vivo X90 Pro Plus, which has a bigger sensor but still lags even more horribly. In addition, the Galaxy has better detail and colors. Vivo is lighter, but what's the point if it's a mess? So, at night, I recommend either keeping the camera still or moving it smoothly. That way, you will get a consistent frame rate with low levels of noise. Within reasonable limits, of course. If you shoot in pitch darkness, then there will be a lot of background noise. For reasons of clarity, here is the S21 Ultra and S23 Ultra side by side. There is only 2 years difference between these smartphones. Do you still think mobile technologies are stagnating after that? The autofocus in these lighting conditions works well, and I really like how the camera captures people. The exposure may vary slightly, but it does so carefully without sudden jumps, much better than it was before. Night zoom videos surprised me to some extent because I expected the worst. There are certainly enough issues and background noise, but still you can get some details. The selfie camera at night doesn't perform as the main one. There is too much noise and distortion, and problems with stabilization. I didn't really like how it shoots at night. Well, it was a long story about the camera, but I wanted to make my point clear. The S23 Ultra's camera really makes an impression. It's the versatility that makes it so interesting. A bunch of different modes, zoom capabilities, expert RAW, not expert RAW, and so on. I don't see myself getting bored with this camera in a week or two, and I feel confident I will be able to take any photo I want with it, and that's something other phones can't quite provide. And I want you guys to hold this thought. At the review's conclusion, when we sum up the results, this idea will be helpful. It is also important to understand that photos and videos are largely a matter of taste. What one likes, another may not like, and that's okay. According to most blind camera tests, some Google Pixel from last year usually performs best, so there can be no any type of special assessment. The photos may or may not appeal to you, but the S23 Ultra's camera's versatility is hard to deny. Okay, let's talk about performance. The Galaxy S23 Ultra features a special version of the latest Snapdragon 8 chip that's tuned with a 150Hz higher clock speed specifically for Samsung Galaxy devices. To be honest, I can't say that I've pushed the phone to its limits. I play games, use apps, make calls, use Bluetooth, take 200 megapixel photos and shoot some 8K videos. Even with all of that, the S23 Ultra just shrugs it all off. Clearly, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 for Galaxy was the right call by Samsung. The mobile platform brings meaningful improvements to the Galaxy phone experience, while Samsung's done its part to optimize the S23 Ultra with a larger vapor cooling chamber and more efficient backend processing. Plus, we get new LPDDR5X RAM and UFS 4.0 storage. Together, you get a phone that's powerful enough for any type of user, including mobile gamers. Now, how to measure the performance of a smartphone? Benchmarks. I don't put much stock in benchmark scores these days. These are just numbers which are easy to manipulate. I wouldn't call myself an avid gamer on the phone either, I still prefer PC. Nonetheless, I made myself play Genshin Impact, which is widely considered as one of the most demanding games. Here is what happened. After 12 minutes of playing, the temperature reached a 42 degrees, which is quite comfortable. The frame rate remained stable at 60. After 20 minutes and a battle in some temple, FPS dropped to 55 and even 50 in some spots. After 30 minutes, sometimes it began to drop below 50 FPS, but quite rarely. After I entered the Wolf Temple, the frame rate stabilized at 60 FPS. It got up to 43 degrees, but then the temperature dropped back down to 42, and it remained at same level. After leaving the temple, it's 40 minutes now, the average FPS was 55, sometimes more, sometimes less, but fairly constant overall. After nearly an hour of gameplay, my heroes died. In the end, I'll say that the gameplay is much smoother than on the S22 Ultra. There are practically no lags or micro stuttering that last year's model had. And of course the FPS is stable around 55, sometimes dropping below 50 in graphically intensive scenes, and I never got above 43 degrees. Next, I played Real Racing 3 to test 120 FPS, and it worked perfectly. During the races it was always 120 FPS, and the temperature gradually dropped to 38 degrees after Genshin Impact. Simply put, this shows a certain performance reserve. Finally, I ended my testing with a half-hour session of Shadow Fight and Call of Duty. Things are very much the same here. FPS is consistently high, the gameplay is smooth and enjoyable, the temperature dropped to 37 degrees. What can we conclude? The S23 Ultra's performance is exceptional. It is close to its limit on the most graphically demanding titles like Genshin Impact, but when we play something less demand or set the graphics settings to medium, then the phone has a reserve and cools down nicely. Interestingly, the smartphone has the post-USB power delivery feature for games. When enabled, it stops charging the battery and bypasses the power directly to the processor. This reduces heat generated by the battery charging process, which makes the whole phone cooler, thereby improving the phone's performance while gaming. Some laptops have a similar feature. As it turned out, it's been available in some older flagships for some time, and it is odd that the company didn't say a word about it. For some, it can be a lifesaver. To enable battery bypass feature on Galaxy devices, do the following. Connect your device to a charger. The adapter and the cable should support USB PD and be of output more than 25 watts. Open any game on your phone. Now, minimize the game and access Game Booster settings by swiping up from the bottom of the screen while the game is running and hitting the Game Booster icon. Only after that, you will see the pause USB power delivery feature. Turn it on and your phone should stop charging while the game is active. Once you exit or minimize the game, charging will resume normally. Definitely a feature worth having. I tried it out and when it was enabled, the smartphone didn't get warm. And of course, you need to compare the S23 Ultra with its predecessors and not with smartphones that are designed for games at the expense of battery life or something else. I think there is one thing we can be sure of. The Galaxy S23 Ultra is about 30 to 50% faster and more stable than the S22 Ultra. The frame rate in games is a clear indication of this. And this is the main thing you need to understand about the S23 Ultra's performance. The entire system is incredibly smooth and fast. Also allow me to geek out about Samsung smoothing out One UI's animations. Yes, animations are much more realistic and faster, like it has more FPS or something. This is especially noticeable with rotating animation. Just look at that, without delay and very beautiful. Even the buggy Twitter app feels smooth and responsive now on One UI 5.1. My model has 12GB of RAM and 256GB of internal storage space. There is an 8GB version available, but it's probably worth getting the higher specification one if you are planning to keep the phone for a while. Internal storage is also an important consideration. There was some drama about how much Samsung is using for system on the Galaxy S23 models. My phone displays 37GB of storage space consumed by the system. Other versions of the S23 Ultra report the system file size to be even larger. The funny part is that it has always been that way. Here is my S21 Ultra and we can see that 36GB of storage space is taken up by the system. But that doesn't make it any easier. Almost 40GB is a lot. Let's figure out what's going on. The amount of storage space consumed by the system depends on some pre-installed apps and services that aren't built into Android system. Things like ultra-wideband, SmartThings, Bixby, etc. all have 3 to 4 different applications that make the services work. But to a greater extent, the system size on Samsung phones depends on the memory configuration. The larger storage, the larger the system size you get. And that's because Samsung tries to compensate for the difference between the advertised storage capacity and the actual storage capacity of the device. You always lose about 7% of storage marketed by manufacturers due to conversion losses associated with representing 1024 bytes per kilobyte as 1000 bytes per kilobyte. That's why 1TB storage has 930GB usable space, 512GB storage has 494GB usable space, and so on. Samsung chooses to add that missing storage space into the system section, but you can't ignore this either, so I hope you'll find this information useful. Moving on to battery life, another big and important improvement. The Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra didn't see any battery size change this year, still sitting at a fairly large 5000 mAh capacity. Based on how I personally feel it, the battery life has increased by 20% in my normal usage. This is a huge difference, which is achieved through a more energy efficient chip and memory. I don't see the point in showing screen on times because it's such a biased metric that I wonder why so many people have asked me about it. Everyone has different ways of using a smartphone, different screen brightness, various background applications, there may be different refresh rates, maybe Wi-Fi or maybe 4G or even mobile hotspot, there may be power saving mode enabled. Speaking of it, in the battery settings, there is a new option Performance Profile. Here you can choose between standard and light. The latter prioritizes battery life, limiting the performance at peak load. So you can achieve any screen on time as it depends on a lot of factors. It is worth mentioning more specific assessments. Watching a 2-hour YouTube video via Wi-Fi drains the battery by just 15%. Genshin Impact drained the battery from 100% to 79% in 1 hour, so 21% loss in 1 hour. While playing less demanding games, the phone drained to 67% in the next 1 hour, so it's 12% loss in 1 hour. Incredible when the phone doesn't need to work at its limits during games. It consumes the battery twice as efficiently. Standby time seems very good. My S23 Ultra loses about 4% of its battery overnight without always-on display. The battery life on the S23 Ultra is unbelievably phenomenal, but the smartphone brings no change in charging speeds. You still get 45 watts super fast charging with the charger costing extra, as there isn't one in the box. The Galaxy S23 Ultra ships with Android 13 and One UI 5.1 out of the box. Neither Google nor Samsung rocked the boat last year with revolutionary UI redesigns, and that holds true with this latest batch of updates and features. Truthfully, nearly every change in this mid-cycle bump is pretty small, though it's worth highlighting just a few of them. First of all, animation, as I said before, was greatly improved. Those new battery widgets may look reminiscent of the ones currently found on iOS, but that doesn't make them any less useful. Seeing connected devices charge levels with just a quick glance is always handy. There are plenty of quality of life improvements too, including expert RAW access directly from the camera app once it's installed, and the ability to change where your screenshots are saved on the device. Samsung also added object recognition and separation capabilities to its gallery app. Long press on an object or person in a photo. If that object or person is recognized, the image can be shared on a transparent background, copied to the clipboard and pasted into other apps. Other additions include new actions in modes and routines. Finally, Samsung provides one of the longest commitments to software updates in the industry, with 4 years of major OS updates and 5 years of security updates too. It's another crucial aspect of the device's longevity and a reason to buy and keep using your phone for years to come. Still on the subject of software, we have to bring up the S Pen, the legendary stylus for Galaxy devices, which is hidden in a special slot at the bottom of the smartphone. It's securely held in place, and the tiny internal battery powering the Bluetooth is charged while it's docked, ensuring it's always ready to go. The pen is thin and relatively short, but I find it comfortable to hold and scribble notes. No word on latency improvements this year, so we'll assume it's the same 2.8 milliseconds in Samsung Notes thanks to the AI point prediction. It's as multifunctional as you could expect from a stylus, providing ways to clip images and text, translate text, take notes, sketch, and even make use of it as a remote shutter button for the phone's camera. There is no question it's well engineered and is more versatile than a passive stylus, but whether you use it regularly or not depends on you. Advanced screenshot capture is one of the S Pen's main use cases. Smart Select allows you to take differently shaped screenshots, extract text from them, or pin them on the screen. When you remove the pen while the phone is locked, you can scribble endless notes on the black screen. Press the side button to erase a word and tap Save to store the note in Samsung Notes. It's incredibly responsive, very fast, and the palm rejection is spot on. Jotting things down on your phone like this is seamless and really fast. It's not just lock screen notes that are fast, it's the whole thing. Use the instant translation feature by hovering the S Pen over the top of the text you want to translate, and in less than a few seconds it appears in a pop-up box. There are numerous other smaller use cases for the S Pen as part of the Air View set of actions. For example, you can hover over an image in the gallery for an enlarged preview, or over a calendar entry for more details. You can also scroll up and down by hovering the S Pen over the edge of the screen. By the way, if you want to use the tablet stylus on your smartphone, then go to the S Pen settings and enable the multiple S Pens option. It is written that this can increase battery consumption, but in my case, it's worth it. I can use S Pen from my Galaxy Tab on the Galaxy S23 Ultra. Nice. So, what do we have in the end? Here's the thing. No doubt, you can find a smartphone that will show a higher frame rate in games like Genshin Impact. Maybe other smartphone camera will be more to your taste. Somewhere there will be louder speakers, for example, even the display you can find brighter now, or the battery life of some smartphone will last a bit longer. And it's all super important, and the Galaxy S23 Ultra is worthy of competing with the very best in their fields. But I would like you to get back to the point I made about cameras. The Galaxy S23 Ultra is so darn versatile, just like its camera. It has given me enough confidence to say that it's one of the most complete handsets you can buy this year, if not the most complete. There is really no other phone that reaches of this level of functionality. In the meantime, let's be clear, there are no ideal smartphones, and this one is no exception. Don't think that since I like the smartphone so much, it is absolutely perfect and it will break new grounds in your life. After all, we have to live in the reality. The Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra is an undeniable upgrade over last year's model. The battery life on the Galaxy S23 Ultra is amazing, and so is its performance. The camera too is improved, beyond just the 200 megapixels numbers on the posters, cementing the Ultra as one of the top camera phones on the market. Upping the base storage to 256GB from 128GB at no additional cost is a practical benefit for every user. And then there is the S Pen, a unique tool found only in the Ultra line. This comes on top of the phone's incredibly long list of features. There's a real pleasure in using a phone that puts ability ahead of gimmicks and keeps a sensible yet stylish and recognizable design over needlessly changing it up to try and attract buyers. It's a combination that makes it one of the best phones in 2023. At the same time, you should also ask yourself if you really need all those features on your smartphone. After all, it does cost a pretty penny. Like I said before, I don't think it's necessary to upgrade your smartphone every year. I believe the Galaxy S23 Ultra is the best phone you can buy right now, but if your current daily driver is serving you just fine, you shouldn't feel pressure to upgrade. Galaxy S22 Ultra and S21 Ultra owners certainly fall into this category. But if you're in the position for an upgrade, I can't think of a more competent phone to switch to. It's definitely expensive, but this phone is built to last. I can't imagine what Samsung could possibly roll out in the next couple of years that would convince anyone with an S23 Ultra to throw it away. In 3 or even 4 years time, when it's still a great phone, you'll look back and see what good value it actually was. Guys, I hope you watched the review to the end. I look forward to your feedback in the comment section below. I also ask you to share this video with your friends, perhaps it will help someone make a choice. Thanks for watching, see you in the next video, good luck to all.